What's up guys, my name's Brandon, and Apple has greatly improved the iPhone's battery life over the past couple of years with both hardware and with software, so a lot of the old settings that I used to recommend don't really make much of a difference anymore. So instead of telling you to turn off all the cool features on your iPhone that actually make it useful, let's discuss some iPhone battery tips that actually make a difference without ruining your experience. And just a warning, you might feel personally attacked by some of these points, especially the last two. Okay, so this first one is a classic, but I can't believe how many people still do not know that this exists. So if you go into your settings and then go into accessibility and then go down here until you get to display and text size and then go down to the bottom and you will see reduce white point. Now that is not the tip here. This is something that when you enable this, it will show you a percentage. The higher up you go, the darker your screen gets. The lower the percentage, the brighter your display gets. And of course, even at its lowest, 25%, it's still darker than default, which is great for saving battery life and also just not being so bright at night. But the tip here is to have a quicker way to access this. And one of the top ways is going to be inside of the control center. So this toggle right down here is for that. So if you tap on the plus in the top left, go to add control and then search for reduce, you will see that we have it right there. And you can also do this on your lock screen. So if you long press on your lock screen, go to customize and then go to the lock screen, you just want to remove one of these down here and tap on the plus. And then once again, just like the control center, just search for reduce and you will see reduce white point right there. And now you can access reduce white point straight from your lock screen. Now here's a tip that you might not think is correlated with battery life, but it actually is, even if it's just slightly. So if you go into your settings and go down to sounds and haptics and then go all the way to the bottom, and you'll see we have a new toggle in iOS 18 called volume limit for the built-in speaker. Go into that and you want to limit the maximum volume for your iPhone's external speakers. I would recommend having this on for everybody and just make sure it's on 90 or anything below that. So this is something that you'll just set and forget. That way you don't strain your iPhone speakers, which of course could also lead to some slight battery drain over time. Now this next tip is very important and it's related to the temperature of your iPhone. So Apple recommends keeping your iPhone, the phone itself, between 32 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's pretty hard to measure your iPhone just at any given time. So the thing you want to be aware of is the ambient temperature, so the outside or the indoor temperature. So Apple recommends between 62 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, with 62 to 72 degrees being the sweet spots. So the main takeaway here should be that if you're outdoors, like maybe at a beach, bring a cooler or a backpack and keep your phone in there when it's not in use to prevent your device from overheating. And of course, that will drain battery more than anything. Temperature is the #1 enemy, as I always say, of lithium-ion batteries. So keep that in mind. And if you want to learn more about, how iPhone batteries work and why heat makes a negative impact, watch my video that I made on battery health. That's linked up in the cards and down in the description below. Now, here's another tip that I've really noticed over the past year or so has made a bigger impact than I feel like it used to, and that is Hey S. I would recommend disabling this unless you actually use it via voice daily. So the reason I say that is because me personally, if I need to access Siri, I just press and hold on the side button and then I say whatever I need to say. Or now with iOS 18, I just double tap the bottom right here and type to Siri. So both of those are not only more efficient and quick for me, but also more accurate. It doesn't really mix up what I'm saying like voice. And also if you just have your iPhone always listening for Hey S, of course that will also have a negative impact on your battery life. So go into your Siri settings and go to talk and type to Siri. And I would recommend turning that off if you're somebody who does not use, voice daily. Now this next one is going to be very obvious if you've watched my channel for a while and if you just have general knowledge of iOS, but I need to share it for those who may not be as knowledgeable, and that is to not force quit all applications. So if you go into your app switcher here and you swipe up, that will quit the application. That is not good for the battery life. That is an age-old myth. It's really never been true with iOS because Apple has perfected background caching. So if you're not actively using an application, iOS puts it in a suspended state, meaning that it's not actively using resources or draining battery. Now, with that being said, the only applications I ever force quit myself is Waze or Apple Maps or some type of application that's using my location. But other than applications like that, do not force quit applications. It's just going to take more energy for your iPhone to relaunch that application. When you close it and then go to relaunch it, it's going to take more energy from your device to do that. Apple even says on their support page that you should only force quit applications if it's unresponsive or if you're seeing some type of bug. Now, here's something that a lot of people don't even realize they have turned on, and you might want to turn this off because this can lead to battery drain, and that is in your settings right here, screen time. So obviously screen time is going to be highly beneficial, especially if you have kids or family members on your account to keep track of their screen time. However, if you're not somebody who uses screen time often, I would recommend going ahead and turning this completely off. So here's another easy one to implement, and that is to use Wi-Fi when it's available, because browsing social media or watching videos while on cellular will drain battery faster. Even if you're in a public place like an airport or a coffee shop, be sure to be using Wi-Fi. Just make sure to use a VPN while using those public networks. And my preferred VPN service happens to be from today's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark not only allows you to browse the web privately by encrypting your activity, but you can also access sites or watch certain movies or TV shows that might be blocked in your state or region. And that's because Surfshark masks your real IP address, which also makes it harder for websites and advertisers to track your physical location. And if you want to take your online security a step further, Surfshark also has a service called Alternative ID, which allows you to generate an online name, email, and phone number to mask your real name and contact information. And with Surfshark, you can use your account on an unlimited number of devices at the same time, plus you have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you want to give it a try, go to surfshark.com/BrandonButch to get 4 months of Surfshark for free. Now here's another classic tip, and that is to disable push emails on your iPhone. This is something that drains battery like crazy, and it's not really something that if you disable it, it's going to take away from your experience. At least it should not. So go into your settings, go to apps, and then go down to the M's and go to mail, and then to mail accounts. And from here, you want to go to fetch new data, and I would recommend having push turned off, and then I have fetch set to manually. That way, my iPhone only checks for new emails when I go into the mail application. That's when it refreshes, and that's when I see my new emails. And you could also change it on a per account basis right here as well. So if you maybe have one inbox where you need to see everything right away, you can change that right here. But for most people, I'd recommend having this turned on to manual and push turned off. And that leads me to something else I want to mention, and that is turning off notifications for applications that do not require it. So one way to do that is going into notifications and going into each individual app and changing the notification settings. But what I find to be a much easier and much more efficient way of disabling notifications for apps that you don't care about is by going into a focus mode. So go into your settings, go to focus, and from here, either choose a predetermined focus mode, so just do not disturb, for example, and then go to the apps section. And from here, you want to add applications that are important to you that you do need push notifications for throughout the day. And then all the other applications will not get push notifications, which of course will lead to greater and longer battery life. And also, if you go into notifications, I would highly recommend going into whichever individual notification that you get notifications from and going down here and turning off the sounds for those notifications. So badges is also something I would recommend turning off just because it messes up your home screen. It makes it look kind of messy. It looks cleaner without badges. And it's also a good idea to set up your scheduled summary right here. So you could set the time and then you just turn on whatever application you want to show up in that scheduled summary. And that will take all your notifications from throughout the day and only send them to you one time or multiple times when you have it on your schedule. Now, I'm not going to tell you to disable the always on display if you have an always on display compatible device, but what I will tell you is that you might want to disable the wallpaper that you can see there, because pixels are still being brightened up. They're still being used to power that slight color that you see there. So what you should do to save battery life is go into your settings, go to display and brightness, and then go down to the always on display. And right here under customize, you might want to turn off show wallpaper. That way it is now completely black. Now this isn't gonna, magically make your device save a ton of battery life, life, but it is something pretty small that doesn't really impact your usability. It doesn't really take away features from your device. You still get the always on display. You just don't have the wallpaper showing right there. So that is something I would recommend playing with. And you can also turn off notifications if you don't like those, but I find that to be useful, so I keep that on. So here's something I want you to think about. Anytime that you're doing an activity on your iPhone, just mentally think about what you're doing and if that activity or that task can be done on another device instead. So what I mean by that, here's an example. I find myself at my desk all the time watching YouTube videos or listening to music on my iPhone, even though I'm sitting right in front of a computer. Or sometimes I'm right in front of the TV and yet I'm watching something on my iPhone. That doesn't really make sense. And of course that will lead to, battery degradation because you are using your iPhone instead of the device that you're sitting right in front of. So just be more mentally aware of what you're doing and if that can be done on another device instead. Now, what would you tell me if I told you that my iPhone 16 Pro Max never charges up to 100%? A lot of people out there would say either A, your device is broken, take it to Apple, or B, why would you set your battery charge limit to only go to 90% instead of getting the full 100% of that battery? And the reason for that is twofold. So number one, it will preserve your battery life long term. So if you plan on keeping your device for several years, this will prolong the battery's health by not charging it up to 100%. And the second reason, the main reason for me personally, is that iPhone batteries perform best when they are not fully charged up. That's what Apple said. And Apple actually recommends for us to stay kind of in that middle ground on our iPhone, around 60 to 80%. And having, our battery charge only to 90% max kind of keeps us closer to that sweet spot. So I would recommend most people go ahead and do that. So go to your settings, go to battery, go to charging, and you might want to set this to around 90%. Really just whatever it takes for you to get through your day and not really fret about your battery life too much. I find that 90% works best for me. Okay, so we cannot make a video about battery life and not talk about Apple Intelligence. So there's no doubt that Apple Intelligence does eat up quite a bit of battery life. I've noticed this time and time again, especially after iOS 18.2 and the ChatGPT integration. So, if you do have an iPhone 16 or an iPhone 15 Pro series and you have Apple Intelligence, I would recommend either A, turning this off completely if you're not somebody who uses it consistently, or B, just disable certain features that you do not use, such as the ChatGPT extension. I find this to use quite a bit of battery life, so you might want to turn that off if you're not a fan of it. However, I find that to be a very useful feature. Now, here's a tip that I've talked about before, but I honestly just recently started using it, and that is to use offline maps for your city. If you go around the same streets every single day, it's probably a good idea to use offline maps instead of using your battery life and your data with, live maps. So go into your Maps application and go to your profile picture. And from here, go to offline maps. And you might want to go on the plus right here and then select your current location or just search for your city or the city that you're going to. So if I search for Orlando, for example, it will take me to that area and I can kind of go around here and choose the exact area that I maybe travel through frequently. And then I can go ahead and download that. And then once that's downloaded, you might want to enable this right here to only use offline maps. And that's going to use the downloaded map even when you have an internet connection, whether that be Wi-Fi or LTE. Now keep in mind that when you use offline maps, you will not have live traffic. So you might want to check, the live traffic before you leave to make sure there's not an accident or a ton of unexpected traffic. So auto brightness is a setting that I used to say caused a battery drain because it wasn't always very accurate and it wasn't really good at getting your device dim in dark situations. However, over the last 2 years specifically, Apple has greatly improved auto brightness enough to where I can say that most people should have this turned on. So go into your accessibility settings and then go down to display and text size, and then all the way down at the bottom, I would recommend having auto brightness turned on. And of course, if auto brightness does not get dark enough for you, you could always go ahead and manually adjust that, or you can use the control center toggle like we talked about earlier for turning on reduce white point to make your screen darker. Now, low power mode is another one of those settings where I've completely changed my mind from what I used to say and what I used to recommend in the past. So I used to say that, you could turn on low power mode at like 50%, 60%, and it's going to save you some battery life. But what I've realized now is that not only has iOS gotten more optimized and better for battery life, but also low power mode just takes away too much of the overall experience on your iPhone, so much so where it's not really worth it to use on a daily basis. Like it throttles performance, it turns off certain features. I just don't think that low power mode is worth using on a daily basis unless you absolutely need it and you're at like 20% or lower. And that leads me right to the next tip, and that is to not let your iPhone ever get to 20% or lower if you can help it whatsoever. That's very bad for the battery life. You should always try to keep your phone charged up whenever possible. So third-party widgets look awesome, but some of them could cause battery drain. And what I've noticed over the past year is that really the only third-party widgets that cause battery drain are unoptimized applications. So I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all where you can just say don't have any third-party widgets on your home screen. I think that certain widgets are fine. Just avoid any that update constantly in the background and some that are maybe not from really big applications and really known developers, if that makes sense. So certain applications like Uber, I'm pretty confident that that's not really going to drain battery life because the developers obviously optimize this widget for battery life. So just don't install sketchy applications or relatively unknown applications and put those as widgets on your home screen because that can lead to battery drain. But I think overall it's fine to have some third-party widgets. Okay, so we waited long enough. Let's talk about background app refresh. If you go into your settings, general, and go to background app refresh, this is something that's going to be controversial, but I think that this could be on for most applications. However, I do not think that it should be on for social media applications. So I think this should be turned off for applications where it actually will update a lot in the background. And the number one application where I think that happens is with social media. So I'd recommend going in here and turning off background app refresh for applications like social media apps specifically. And I would also recommend turning off background app refresh for applications that you just don't use on a consistent basis. And also if you go up here to background app refresh, I would recommend turn this on to Wi-Fi only and not Wi-Fi and cellular, because of course, Wi-Fi is going to use less battery life than cellular does. And that's why I always recommend to use Wi-Fi when you're in an area where Wi-Fi is available. And by the way, I do need to clarify that background app refresh does not impact or affect notifications whatsoever. So just because I turn off, background app refresh for Facebook does not mean I will not get a push notification right when something happens on Facebook. That still happens. I still get that push notification. This is just not refreshing the application at all times in the background. Now here's another setting where I used to say the opposite, and that is if you go into your settings, display and brightness, and then go down to the auto lock. I used to say that you should have this set to never, that way your device doesn't keep dimming and you have to keep waking it up. However, now I think it should be on 5 minutes to 3 minutes. Somewhere in that range is where I think it should be. That way you don't fall asleep, with your phone on and maybe it just never locks or whatever instance it is. I would recommend most people just have this set to anything but never and anything but 30 seconds. Now here's another classic that I have to mention. If you go into your settings, go to privacy and security and then into location services, from here I would recommend going into your applications and checking on which ones are allowed to use your location and disabling this for applications that really have no reason to use your location. So for example, you can see that for things like ESPN, they don't need to know my location, and for things like maybe Snapchat, they don't need to know my location. Just go into here. So we're going to go into this and go to never for allow location access. And even when you do allow location access, you might want to go ahead and turn off precise location. That way the application does not know the exact location, it just knows an approximate location. So that's good to have as well. And of course you can always have ask next time or when I share right here as well. And then if you go down here to system services, you have all these toggles right here where I've recommended in the past, and I think a lot of people recommend now, to turn some of these off. However, I would recommend probably keeping most of these turned on. That way your device works properly and as it should. A lot of these functions are actually really useful, so I'd recommend just keeping all of these turned on. None of them are going to make a big impact on your battery life. However, under product improvement, you can turn these 3 off because these aren't going to negatively affect your experience and they're really easy to potentially save a little bit of battery life. Now the next tip is a simple one, and that is to go into your battery section in your settings and just study your chart. So if you go to the last 10 days, this is where you can really start to see patterns and which applications are eating up the most of your battery life. So if I go to Tuesday, for example, you can see that it shows everything that used my battery life on that Tuesday, and it shows that Kino was the biggest culprit, using 81% of my battery that day. And if you tap right here again, it will show the amount of time that you spent on screen and also in the background. So just look for little spikes, especially on the 24-hour chart. Look for those little spikes and kind of just investigate. If you tap on this, it will show you everything that was used in that time frame. Now, here's a tip that you might not want to hear, but another great way to save battery life is to stop the doom scrolling and stop relying on your phone for hits of dopamine. I know this is harsh advice, but if you're spending more than 6 hours on your phone per day, you might want to cut back and you might want to stop the doom scrolling. You're just looking for things on social media because you're bored and you don't have anything to do. There's a lot of better things you could be doing than doom scrolling on your phone and eating away at your iPhone's battery life. The reality is, no amount of battery savings tips will work if you just simply use your phone too much throughout the day. Even if you had an iPhone 32 Max with a crazy battery life that lasts 24 hours, you're gonna run through that if you just use your phone to doom scroll all day on TikTok and on Twitter. And then the very last tip I'll share is to stop obsessing over your battery life and stop checking it all day long and all throughout the day. I used to think like this, and I know how much it drives you crazy. So what I've done on my main device is go into my battery section right here, and I just turn off battery percentage. It's a small thing, but now when I don't see the battery number up there, it makes me less anxious about my battery life, my battery percentage. So yeah, I'll say it again, stop obsessing over battery life. Stop checking your battery life throughout the day. So those are some of my most useful battery saving tips for the iPhone here in 2025. And there are a lot of others out there, but again, I tried to focus on tips that are not going to take away from your overall iPhone experience, and it's not going to have you turning off every cool feature that you paid for. So I hope this video helped you out. If it did, give it a thumbs up. Also be sure to subscribe for more battery savings tips and also just iPhone related videos. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.